Hello everyone, welcome to this part of Active Directory Certificate Services Attack Series. In this video we'll look into ESC9, which has multiple prerequisites to be successfully exploited. First one being that you need to be able to set a user principal name or UPN for any user. It could be the user we have control over or another user. For example, for user A we may be able to set UPN on ourselves, or if we have a user B we have something like GenericWrite over, we could set an arbitrary UPN for that user. Another practice is that the template has to have CT flag, no security extension flag, in their msPKI-Enrollment-Flag attribute. I know that was a mouthful, but we'll talk later about what that actually means. Another one is that the StrongCertificateBindingEnforcement registry key on domain controllers must be set to 0 or 1, which has been the default up until February 2025. That's when Microsoft changed it and started setting it to 2. But I'm sure you'll find lots of domain controllers that have been created before February 2025, so they'll have that registry key set to default 0 or 1, so that shouldn't be a problem for the most part at this point. And our final prerequisite is that the template must allow client authentication in extended key usage. Lots of templates do, we'll see how it works. Alright, let's dive in and look more into all those prerequisites and see what they actually mean. As always, first let's start with a little bit of explanation about how all this works, and we'll refer to the Certipy Wiki for this. So as in the description, looks like in May of 2022, Microsoft added this new extension called SCZOAD. You can read it for yourself, it's very hard to read. Basically what this extension does is that it creates a strong certificate mapping based on user seed instead of the email or user principal name. It could cause potential compatibility problems, and so some people would disable it by setting this flag, which is CT flag, no security extension. And what this does, it makes, if seed mapping is not available, it's gonna fall back to user principal name. And this kind of what tells it will lock the primary seed security extension. And yeah, that's kind of the second prerequisite, I think. Yep. Another prerequisite which we talked about was the StrongCertificateBindingEnforcement registry key on domain controllers. So we can see that has been set to 0.1 up until February 2025. And if it's set to 2, DC will refuse the certificate and will only accept certificates that from a template that has this actual extension set. And this talks about the explanation. So first one is manipulating UPN. That's why we need to be able to override UPN for a user. So how it works is that we have a user who can override UPN for itself or any other user. And so what we do is we change the victim's UPN to our target, for example, administrator, request certificate as that victim, and then revert UPN back to the victim's account, so to the original one. And because there's no UPN that matches it, in the case you find no seed extension and operating in compatibility mode, it will use the UPN from the certificate which we modified, and it's gonna give us certificate for the UPN we have set, which is gonna be administrator in our case, because it now matches the target, like whatever we set in step 2. Just gonna throw it out, it's gonna be ugly, but hopefully it will make more sense. So our scenario, we got our user. I just need normal text. User A. And we have something like generic, right? Over another user, which is user B. So we're gonna update the UPN for this user to something like administrator. Then we're going to request a certificate from the ADCS using this UPN. ADCS. So I got a certificate. Now we just, how do I erase here? Yeah, now we remove the CPN to original, which was, for example, user B at marvel.local. So now when we authenticate using the certificate that we requested, this one, administrator.pfx, so I got the certificate. When we're using this to request certificate, because it has UPN set for administrator, which we deleted, but it has no SID mapping, it's gonna fall back to UPN and gonna give us the actual certificate for the administrator user. Hope this kind of makes more sense, but once we're working through the exploitation tool, it will make even more sense. So let's dive in. So let's have my Kali VM, I have my domain controller, and I have my ADCS server. Just gonna show you the template I created for this. So here's my ESC9 template, which first sight doesn't look like it's misconfigured. Like it. In all, it does not supply subject. Under extensions, we can see that it has the client authentication. And under security, there's only one misconfiguration that authenticated users can enroll, but essentially it doesn't give you any way to escalate privileges with it at this point. At least none that you can see right now. So as always, let's start off with our Certipy find command and the reference wiki. So we'll just do Certipy find, user P Parker, our password, I give the main controller, and do standard out, so it doesn't save it to a file. So let's see if we have any vulnerable templates. And we do, there's ESC9. And if we go back to wiki, so here's how it identifies this extension that is set to make sure certificate template ignores the SID extension. So this one's CT flag, no security extension. It's identified like this under enrollment flag. So if we take a look, here we have it, enrollment flag, no security extension. And because we're a domain user, we can actually enroll. And because I have a 2022 domain controller, our registry key is set to 0, I believe. So if I open it, so if we query the registry, as we saw in the article, the registry doesn't exist. So our StrongCertificateBindingEnforcement registry key is set to 0 or 1, and so we meet all the prerequisites. Here's how you could enumerate it. So now let's move into the explanation. Here I only have one user, P Parker, and this user actually has GenericWrite set over himself, so the user can update its own UPN. But it's not the default config, so you might see it in the wild, you might not. Usually you would see something like you compromise the service desk account and they can update UPN for any user, and you would use that as I showed you in this terrible drawing of mine. Alright, so here are the exploitation steps. As always, we'll first add the original UPN of our user so we could revert it back later. And command like this, it's going to be account, as always, username, password, domain controller IP, and we give the user to read. So it looks like our original UPN is P Parker at marvel.local, so we'll just save it somewhere in the file. This one quick. Alright, now to know the original UPN, we'll have to update it to the user when I impersonate, which in our case is administrator user, so we're gonna do that. So I'm gonna update Peter Parker's UPN again. This because I have GenericWrite over this user. This user has GenericWrite over itself. So I'm gonna set the UPN to administrator. This is gonna be our step 1. We go back to the wikis. This is the step 1. Change the victim's UPN. That's what we're doing right now. Now we're gonna get a TGT as this user because it relies on Kerberos. Let's just in packet get TGT script and I give it username and password. Need to export it. Next one, now we're gonna request the certificate that uses our updated UPN. And the command looks like this: certify request -k for Kerberos, domain controller IP, target, which is our ADCS endpoint, our certificate authority, which is Batman-CA, and our template. And we could all get all this information from this command from original one. It has all this. So click enter. And we got an administrator certificate, which is our second step. Now we're gonna revert the UPN back to the original one. I'm gonna do it like this. It's similar to this command, which is gonna set UPN back to what it was because we saved it right here. So I'm gonna do update. All right, now UPN is reverted. So now because of her certificate that doesn't have a SID that would match anyone, it's gonna fall back to using UPN for authentication, which is set to administrator and basically giving us administrator certificate. So the command would look like this. Just give it certify out for authentication, give it PFX that we just got, this is our certificate, domain controller IP, and we need to specify username and domain because I don't think it's part of the PFX itself. So we need to specify it. And we hit enter. And here we go, we got the administrator's hash. And let's see if it actually works. So if I do netexec administrator, give it the hash. And let's see if we see pwned. And yeah, it does see pwned, so we just compromise local admin and we can use something like psexec or secretsdump to actually dump the certificates. Oh, sorry, not the certificates. Too many certificates in this video. Dump the domain controller hashes from NTDS that did. So let's kind of just the gist of the attacks, and now let's talk about mitigations. So as per mitigations, if we go back to our ADCS endpoint, this is what sets that specific no security extension flag, so we need to remove it. Just do -. So now if we run the command again, I think I might need to update the template. So now we reverted security extension back to being present instead of removing it. And now for our certify find command, we shouldn't see the vulnerability anymore. And yeah, it's gone. So let's step number 1, make sure you don't have that security extension set. If you need it for compatibility reasons, you might want to plan for decommission those systems that don't work well with this because it's a real security concern. And second one, you want to set this register key to be 2. And the command for this would look like this. New item property, TDC, and we give this the path property value and dash force. So let's all set the strong binding to 2, which would also prevent this type of attack. I'm not gonna do this right now because it's my test lab and I like to test things out. So I'm just gonna leave it as is. But yeah, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any more questions, or some of the explanation didn't make sense to you, I'm also gonna link an article from SpectreOps that explains it all, and you can also go back to Certipy Wiki to read up on this more. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.